topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Churchill said, "Those who fail to learn from history are condemned to repeat it." Kevin Hallinan believes that certainly applies to business. Welcome to Winning Business Radio, here at W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. And now, your host, Kevin Hallinan.
Thanks, everybody, for joining in today. I'm Kevin Hallinan, and welcome back to Winning Business TV and Radio on W4CY.com. We're streaming live on Talk4TV.com and, of course, on Facebook, and that's at Winning Business Radio. And we are available in podcast after the live show, pretty much wherever you get your podcast content. YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, again, pretty much wherever. The mission of Winning Business Radio and TV, as regular viewers know and listeners, is to offer insights and advice, right, to help people avoid the mistakes of others. Those are the best practices, the how-tos, the what-tos, the what-not-tos, to be challenged and hopefully to be inspired by the successes of others. Who are those others? Consultants, coaches, advisors. Today, our guest is an author, founders and owners, entrepreneurs, people with expertise. But, you know, virtually every successful person that I've ever had a chance to talk to has had some form of failure in their lives and careers. So, like I say, we all have to get our knees skinned once in a while. I'm driven to keep those scrapes from needing major surgery. Let's endeavor to learn from history so we don't repeat it. I've spent the better part of my career equipping businesses to grow, from solopreneurs to small and medium-sized businesses, all the way up to the Fortune 50. And I've seen some of those companies win, and to varying degrees, I've seen some fail. Individuals as well. I've had the opportunity to rub elbows with some of the highest performing people around and with some who probably should have found other professions. In my own businesses, I've had lots of success and some failures too. I like to think I've learned a lot from those experiences. So you're going to hear from me, my opinions and insights, because anybody who knows me, John, will tell you that I sometimes have a hard time being quiet. And we're not going to talk Celtics today, even though I'm wearing a Red Sox polo in your honor, John. But more importantly, today, we're going to hear from experts, those consultants, coaches, advisors, author John today, founders and owners and entrepreneurs. So today, my guest is longtime friend John Cady. He's the author of several books, including the young adult urban fantasy novel series, Angela of Death. John was born and raised in Massachusetts. When he's not busy teaching the English language arts to juvenile offenders, he's making memories with his family and entertaining readers with his stories. These stories can be found in multiple anthologies, including After the Cool Is Gone, It's All Fun and Games Until Somebody Dies. I love that one. ABCs of Terror Volume 3 and The Dire Circle. His debut middle grade horror novella, Attack of the 3D Zombies, was published in January of 2022. His Outbreak young adult urban fantasy trilogy, the Angela of Death trilogy, is available to the public on Amazon and wherever books are sold. He lives in Southeastern Mass with his wife, Missy, daughter, Abby, and son, John. John, welcome to Winning Business Radio. So cool to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's fun. My wife's been reading your books, as I think you know. And when the third one, it's either the second or the third Angela of Death book came out, I said, I got to get John on the radio. So we reached out and we made that happen. And I've got all three books right here. I'll show them up.
Thank you.
In a moment or at some point on the show, but check this one out.
Oh, that's old school. You're going way back now.
This is old school. This is a paperback. Is this the first book?
Yeah, that's the first one I ever wrote. That was I self-published that one.
I thought. So we'll get to that, but I just thought it would be fun to show you that.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about Missy and your kids for the audience.
Oh, they're wonderful. So Missy's all three of them, at the risk of sounding like not too Jimmy Stewart like, but they're my everything. They're the reason I do everything. They're the reason I go to bed happy and I wake up smiling.
Yeah.
Even if I only get like 4 hours of sleep, but That's because of the pets we have. They wake me up in the middle of the night a lot.
How many pets?
We have a dog and a cat that they're as bad as like when we had if we had an infant, like they wake me up that often. So it's,
Man.
But other than that, I'm always smiling. Missy and the kids have me smiling.
That's
they're
awesome.
just wonderful people. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from all three of them. I keep learning.
All right, tell us about your background. First, what town in Massachusetts did you grow up in?
I grew up in Easton, Massachusetts.
Okay, so tell the audiences about Easton.
So it's a small town, and it's everything about it has that small town feel. So it's one of those things where, like, for instance, my son, when he gets home from school, he gets on his bike, grabs his fishing rod, and goes out and meets his friends and goes to whatever pond. And it's like it's that kind of town where you're not worried about him, like you're not worried about a lot of traffic even from cars, or you're not worried about a lot of him wandering into any areas that he shouldn't perhaps be in. So it's like it's one of those Andy Griffith type small towns where you just like it's quiet, and that's how we like it, But other than that, it was a good time. I grew up here, and then I was fortunate enough to buy my boyhood home from my parents. So
nice.
Yeah. So now we're making memories here. We're making the same memories with our kids that my parents made with me.
That's awesome.
For technology.
Give us 30 seconds of history, because it is interesting to me anyway, on Easton.
All right. So we're called the Shovel Town, and a big part of that is the Ames shovels were used for the Transcontinental Railroad. Which I didn't actually, as embarrassing as it is, I didn't know that until about 5 years ago. And then I'm like, whoa, okay.
I mean, everything in that area is named after Ames, right?
Yeah.
Ames High School, Ames Library.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just that family. It seemed like it was just like even their mansions are still in town, and like John Ryan, he goes fishing at the Ames Estate, the Governor Ames Estate. So it's one of those things. The name's everywhere, but it's they put out good products.
Yeah. What were your early interests, like in and just after high school, say?
Well, I always liked creative writing to a point. I mostly wanted to be writing movies. So eventually, when I went to Manhattan College, I first started majoring in education because I was going to be a teacher following my parents' footsteps. And then, the more I realized they had a film school there, and I was like, ooh, I had a friend that was doing the film school stuff, and I'm like, well, I kind of want to write movies. I want to be a screenwriter. So I made that call to Dad. I was like, hey, do you think I'm thinking of maybe switching from being a teacher to going into like film, which that could have come back at me any number of ways. But luckily my parents I've been blessed. They're very supportive. And he said, if that's where your heart is, go with that. So he says, because you're going to put out the best product, or you're going to put out your best work where your heart is. So I said, all right, well, I'm going for it then. So I wrote, I took a bunch of screenwriting classes, and I loved it. I love telling stories. I love writing stories. And so I stuck with that for a while. And then even when I graduated, I was just had a regular 9-to-5 job, but I was sitting there trying to sell my screenplays, and nothing ever took. Like, they all made their way to the circular file, which, trash. So, but it was kind of humbling. It was one of those things. I'm like, I thought I was like this great writer, this great screenwriter, and then meanwhile, I'm like seeing like movie posters for Carrot Top movies and stuff. So
I know, right?
Yeah, mine are collecting dust, if that. So I made the switch to. I said, oh, I'll try writing books then. At least then I'll get people reading them. People will read something. So that's where the journey started.
What were your early jobs? So Manhattan College. By the way, what made you choose that school?
I honestly wanted to go to New York City. I wanted to live in New York City. And then so we went out there to visit the school after I had been accepted. I probably should have looked at the address of where the school was, because it's in the Bronx. It's not really in Manhattan. So I'm like, false advertising. Like hundreds of years. It's been around hundreds of years, false advertising.
That's funny.
But it was but I loved it anyways. And so that's what brought me out there. I just wanted to be, I love Boston, but I really wanted to be in New York City, not for the sports teams, but yeah.
Well, we'd have to disown you if
just for the experience, the experience of living there. Like
we love our New York friends, but we can root against their teams.
Exactly.
Right. So, what kind of early jobs did you have?
Oh, well, so I used to. There was a time I delivered appliances for a company that called Northco. That was a good time. I did that with one of my best friends. Like we could have been doing that forever. We were laughing every day and delivering, just we did our job well, and we were always having a good time. And then I stocked shelves for a while at a liquor store that he managed, which we stuck together. We kind of like the Blues Brothers for a while there, but we were employed. And then eventually I just couldn't. I tried selling kitchens for a while, which it was one of those things where I had asked a good friend of mine who got me the job. I said, do you have to be on like computer like 8 hours a day? Because I'm really not tech savvy. And he's like, oh, no, you won't. No, you won't. And then I get there and I'm on computer like from minute 1 to the end of the day. And I'm like, oh, this is again false advertising. But so eventually that didn't work out just because I hadn't, like I said, I wasn't as tech savvy as a job like that required. And then my father, both my parents had been teachers. So my father finally said, why don't you just try teaching? You have the personality to be a teacher. You love learning and you love, imparting wisdom on the younger generation. And so he's like, you're literally designed for teaching. So I said, all right. And I went, I was a building sub for a few years in Easton at a school I actually went to. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, I do enjoy this. Even the little moments where when you're a sub, they don't really need you teaching them too much, but because it's just like hand out this work and then they'll do it and blah, blah, blah. But the times when the kids actually had
the subs I had, they were like, they showed a movie.
Yeah, the times, yeah, exactly. Rolled in the cart, But the times when the kids had questions, I was loving it. I was like, oh, this is great. This is, and I just kept coming back to that. So finally I said, well, I might as well take it a step further, get my teaching license instead of just being a building sub. And so that's where took off teaching English, taught in New Bedford for 3 years, teaching English. And then I got a job, which I don't even, the funny thing is I don't even recall applying for this job, but I got a job teaching for the Department of Youth Services, which is their incarcerated youth.
All right, pause on that. We're going to come back to that in a minute.
Yeah.
What was it like to get the teaching license?
It took me 9 times to take the test before I passed it.
Yep.
9 times. So I was like the Rocky of the English test. But yeah, it took me 9 times. So that was one of those, I'm not going to give up on it. I'm just going to keep going till I get it.
And did you go up when you finally passed it, did you go up like the 3 steps to your front door and do the?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No one was looking, but I did it anyways. What's this lunatic doing?
So what prepared you most? This will be the last question before the first break. What do you think prepared you most to teach incarcerated kids?
It's one of those things, just having a heart for everyone. Like this, it's one of those things where there's no bad kid. There's choices, poor choices, but there's no bad kid. And some kids are out there. I always tell my kids at home, I said, they're just like you. They just, but in the race of life, they have a cinder block tied to one of their legs. And I just want to help them untie it. So that's kind of what drives me.
That's awesome. All right. We will take our first break right here. Everybody, we'll be back with John Cady in about 1 minute.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
Have you ever dreamt of being on the radio? Well, now is your chance. Be a radio show guest on the #1 ranked internet radio station and promote you and your business for free. Yes, you heard it, free. Business advertising right here on W4CY.com. Call 561-506-4031 now to get booked on one of our shows. That's 561-506-4031. Get your free advertising now.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind, to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back with John Cady, author of many, many stories and books. And the series we're talking about now is Angela of Death, the trilogy. Before we get to that, of course, I want to ask more about the DYS program. Tell us about the program. It's for obviously incarcerated students. They made a bad decision. how long are they there for? Give us just a background, like thumbnail of the program.
Okay, so I work in the detention aspect of it, one of the detention programs. So my students, they've been arrested for crimes they've allegedly committed, and they're awaiting trial. So it could be, some of them have been there, it could be upwards of a year or longer. Some kids, they could be there 2 days. So it's so far, it's so over the map, all the way across the board that, on average, probably maybe 3 months.
So my question is, how do you teach English to someone who may only be there 3 months? How do you know where to start? And do you plug kids into an ongoing program?
So if say we're reading a novel, so I try to keep it to short stories or shorter works, just so it's easier to catch them up, or they can pick it up. A short story you could knock out in 2 days. So basically, I try to keep it to those shorter books. But sometimes if we're reading a novel that the kids are getting into, I'll have the other kids, and it's also a good way to see how much they've comprehended. I'll have them catch the new students up on what's been going on in the book.
That's cool.
Certain books that's easy to do with. Certain books is as long as they point out the major events and whatnot and the major characters, whatever can catch the kid. It's almost like I always joke with them, and I'm like, if it's a new kid, say we're reading Of Mice and Men, I'll say previously on Of Mice and Men, and then I'll have one of my students tell them what's been happening. So, yeah.
And you've been there for how long?
This is my 17th year.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've known you for a long time, but I didn't know you've taught there that long. That's awesome.
Yeah. And like I said, I don't, even my supervisor, she still razzles me every now and then, because I immediately, in the interview, I literally said, I don't remember applying for this, but it was like, I got in there, and I thought it was like I knew it was an alternative school. I knew it wasn't a regular public school.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, like, the gates are slamming shut behind me, and I'm like, where am I? And then I see this kid returning from court who had like the cuffs on, and I'm like, okay, where am I? What is this? Like, I literally didn't know what this was, and I'm like, I need a job though, so it's like
That's
one of those
funny.
things where I want to teach, and I'm going to teach wherever I can teach. I'm going to teach. So it's and so that was one of the questions. She said, "You look confused." It was near the end of the. She said, "Any questions?" I'm like, no question. I just don't recall, applying for this, but. So she said,
maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't recall.
Sorry.
Maybe you didn't recall accepting the job either. 17 years later.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, but now it's one of those things. Once you get used to it, it's such a. You feel great at the end of every day. Like the kid, when these kids get like a good grade that they've earned. I don't give generous grades. Like when they get a grade they've earned, their face first it's surprise, and then it's like their face lights up, and I'm like, I don't even know how many people get to see this side of them. So I'm blessed that I get to see this side of them.
Yeah. What's your teaching schedule like?
Typically, like same hours pretty much as public school. So I get there at 7:30. I leave at 3:30 at the end of the day, and it's one of those things. We follow all the same frameworks and standards that public school has to. That way, like when they leave us, providing they're not committed for a longer stay, when they leave us, they can literally like kind of plug themselves right back into whatever high school they were in, because we're following the same curriculum and standards.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, same framework and standards, not necessarily the same curriculum.
And you have various classes during the day?
Mm-hmm.
Just like
So for example, I teach English language arts and reading.
Yeah. Okay. What's the toughest part of your job?
Toughest part of my job is sometimes, honestly, it's hearing some of the kids. They'll talk about their life outside of class, outside of where we are, which it's good for them to get it off their chest and talk to other kids about it. But sometimes the stories are heartbreaking. Like it's one of those. It's not even culture shock. It's one of those. Oh man, this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened. And then it's so certain moments like that where I realize I've had great upbringing. I've been blessed. And it's one of those things where not everyone's got that same deal, so that same fair deal. So it's one of those things where that's difficult sometimes. And then other than that, it's just, sometimes they'll come in. It's hard to keep them focused on the task at hand when they're worried about, am I going to get out at my court date? Am I going to, this, that, and the other thing? They have a whole set of concerns that I never had. I don't have now, and I especially didn't have at their age. Like, I don't know how I would have handled it at their age. You probably wouldn't have gotten me focused too much on my work if I had that going on.
Their age range is for the audience?
The youngest I've had is 14. The oldest I've had is all the way up to like 21, literally.
Give us just one, I'm going to ask you the best part, but give us just one challenging situation. And then I want you to talk about the best part of your job, more than you said about the recognition of the grades and the smiles and everything.
One challenging situation. Sometimes it's just not enough time in the day for all that we want to do. So, so on top of just teaching, I'm also what's known as a teaching coordinator there. So every program has kind of their principal. They're not called principals, but they're teacher coordinators, because they're really we're the supervisor to whatever teachers are on our program. 3 teacher program I have, so I'm the supervisor there. But also I handle all the admin stuff, like the transcripts and any testing assessments that we have to have to give the kids.
Do you do MCAS?
Yeah. Well, I don't always give the MCAS. Someone will come in to give the MCAS, but there's other assessments that I got to give. So I got to give those on top of the teaching, which I don't complain about it, not even to myself or to my wife, but because it's one of those things where the more we can give these kids, the better.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we can give them more. It's just sometimes it's, you wish, like I said, you wish there were more hours in the day so you could do more for them. So that's a challenge.
All right. Now tell us the best part of the job.
The best part of the job is just like I was saying, when they get good. I was going to say when they get good grades, but just seeing them shine in ways that not everyone gets to see. Like a lot of these kids, society's already written them off. And then sometimes when they see that society's written them off, they write themselves off. So it's one of those things. It's in a tough cycle. And so when I get to see them rooting other kids on to read, and all, that was one thing. One time there was a kid who didn't read at all, but all of his classmates were rooting him on to read. And when he was stumbling over words, they were helping him with the words. And they didn't have to do that. They never have to do that. But it's one of those things where when I get to see that, and it does happen a few times a week, stuff, not necessarily that specific thing, but things like that, I was like, ooh, I wish everyone could see this.
Yeah,
this is what I get to see, and now it's whenever I see, things on the news where, so-and-so got arrested or for something, I do, if it's a young kid, I do worry about them.
Yeah.
Even though they made a bad choice. I don't make excuses for their choice, nor do they. But, it's one of those things where, half the time, if it's a teenager, I know where they're headed. And I hope that whoever they're heading to cares as much about their job as I do, which I'm sure they do. A lot of the teachers for DYS definitely care about their job.
Or, or find another job, right? In other words, they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you know you wanted to be, I don't know if the word is novelist, I'll say writer, but more than a screenwriter?
More than a screenwriter is when I wasn't selling any screenplays.
But you still had a passion to write.
Oh, yeah. I love telling stories. And even those first, like the book that Staying After for Miss Jones, that book, there's a lot. It's heavy on the dialogue because I was coming fresh off of writing screenplays.
Yeah.
So, but I've always wanted to tell stories like that, and I wanted to write the movies. And maybe someday I will get back to writing a movie if they ever want to make a movie of the Angel of Death books. I'd love to write those.
I could see that. Yeah. Where did you get the idea for Staying After for Miss Jones?
That I was trying to write So before I wrote anything fantasy wise or anything, I was trying to write the next Catcher in the Rye. So Catcher in the Rye is a book I've read probably 14, 15 times.
Yeah.
So I've been chasing that book, trying to write like that. If I could ever write in that style or in that voice, then that's what I've been searching for all these years. So that was my attempt at that. And I also tried to write a new different style of writing that I hadn't seen before for that book. So if you ever open that book, it's written from, I believe this is so far long ago now, but
voices. There are at least 3 or 4 different voices, meaning characters.
In that book, there's 3 different characters, and I wanted a story that just went all the way through one continuous thing, like almost like a relay race of narrators. So I did that, and then I was like, oh, that was kind of fun writing that way. And so that's kind of how the Angel of Death ones are written too. Like I wrote it in that style. But yeah, so the Staying After for Miss Jones, that was me. That was me trying to write my Catcher in the Rye, and that was me trying to trying something new with like a different way of writing books, hoping that would take off. Which funny thing about that is, so I had self-published that, and then I had it on Amazon, but then I eventually took it off Amazon and tried to shop it around to agents again, and an agent wanted it, and so I was all excited, and so she had represented people that like she represented the guy who wrote Holes.
Oh wow!
So I was like, oh, this could really happen, and then all of a sudden she said, now is this first? Do you have first rights, or have you? And I'm like, oh well, yeah, I self-published on Amazon, and but I took it off. It's exclusive rights, and I took it off, so it's it's my right. And she goes, oh well, we can't do anything with that. No one's gonna take that. And I'm like, no. So
what's the reason?
Yeah, so from that day forth, never again. That's one of the things I learned in business wise, on the business end of the writing. I'm never doing that again. There's nothing wrong with self-publishing. There's nothing wrong at all with it.
Right.
That's the route you want to go. But in this instance, it cost me who knows what.
So what happened legally?
So the agent claimed, she's like, well, no publisher's going to take it on now because they won't have first rights to it. Because like Amazon or CreateSpace, whoever it was that I had done it with, she said they have first rights.
Oh, they could still retain rights to it.
Yeah. So I'm like,
that makes sense.
I'm like, all right. So I'm like, even if I don't sell another book for a while, I said, I'm not going to do that again just because, and like I said, people have been uber successful with, self-publishing, but it's one of those things where in this particular instance didn't work out so well, or it could have been better had I not done that. But
so what was your self-publishing process? What did that look like?
I literally just once I shopped that around to agents, Staying After Miss Jones, and no one seemed to be biting. I looked on Amazon and someone had said that you can self-publish for them. I'm like, oh, so I had gone on and they said scroll all the way down and there's something called CreateSpace. I don't even know if it's still on there, but you were able to self-publish through them with the ebook versions and in the paperback versions and whatnot. So I was like, well, I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to make sure people can read my book no matter what, even if it's just me publishing it. And so I did that. So fortunately, a good amount of copies were sold. Your wife bought one, which I was very pleased. Every now and then, but at first, there's some risque scenes in it. So I was like, at first, when she told me that she bought it, and I was like, I only knew it from church. I'm like, oh no,
I'm like, writing for a friend.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, so one of my friends, one of my good friends, his sister had bought it for her daughter because she thought it was like a middle grade or some sort of very innocent book. And I'm like, oh no, she can't read that. No, she can't. Because like I said, it does get risky. It's, I don't know what I was going for, but I figured, they don't hold back in Catching the Rye, so I'm not going to hold back.
Yeah. So how much would you roughly spend on a self-published book like that?
Oh, now I don't even remember now. So long ago.
Like total ballpark.
You don't really spend much, but you don't make much.
Yeah.
It's one of those things like Amazon makes the chunk of it.
Yeah.
So it's I think I made for whatever was sold, for whatever per copy sold, I think maybe I made 25%. It was crazy. It wasn't even 50. And then it was and until years later, until I finally got a notable publisher, and who's very good at their job. Then I realized I'm like, oh man, but
it's an education, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's all an education, and that's one of the things where, the writing part's fun too, but half the job is like business wise, like promoting yourself and all that stuff, and so And that's like, those are all learning curves up there. Like back then I was hardly promoting it. I did like one book signing at a restaurant,
Yeah.
which was cool. You know, everyone,
While you were eating a hot dog.
Yeah, most of me.
Just kidding.
Mostly my friends came, so it was a good
Yeah.
time. But
all right, we're going to take our second break. We'll come
Yeah.
back to a little bit more about the business of writing, and then we'll get into the book specifically. Everybody, another minute. We'll be right back with John Cady.
You're listening to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan on W4CY Radio. That's W4CY.com. Don't go away. More helpful information is coming right up, right here on Winning Business Radio.
The YP.com website is your local search engine. If you're looking for a good restaurant, it can help you find the right one nearby with ratings and reviews. Or if your car breaks down, you can use the YP app to find the closest repair shop. Or maybe you're just looking for something to do on a Friday night. Well, it has great local coupons for all sorts of things in your area. No matter what, when, or where, if you're looking for something, YP Local Search can help you find it. So go to YP.com or download the app to search local, find local, and save local.
And now back to Winning Business Radio with Kevin Hallinan, presenting exciting topics and expert guests with one goal in mind: to help you succeed in business. Here once again is Kevin Hallinan.
We're back with John Cady. He is the author of the series Angela of Death. We'll get to that shortly. So it's just the one book that you self-published?
Yes.
Yep. And so the other books, or if you were part of anthologies too. So talk about what, for those that don't know, I had to just refamiliarize myself. Sorry, I can't talk with an anthology. What's that like? What does that look like? And how do you get included?
So an anthology is like a collection of short stories. So for example, if you see like on the shelf in my classroom, like greatest American short stories, and it's like, but it's got like Mark Twain and everyone in it, but it's a collection of short stories that they call an anthology. And sometimes it's by the same author, sometimes it's by multiple. More often than not, it's by multiple authors. So, but yeah, so
and some are themed and some are not.
Yeah, for the most part, they're themed. Yeah.
And so you've been in several of those.
Yeah, so it's funny. So Missy, my wife, her cousin, and we were at a family cookout one time, and he said, "Hal, I know you're a writer and you're trying to get published." I said, "Yeah, I just can't find an agent." He said, "Well, you don't need an agent for horror anthologies." He goes, "Do you write horror?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, I don't like horror. I can't get into it. I never got into horror.
Yeah.
And maybe when I was a kid, but never, since. I get creeped out way too easy. And then so he said, "Oh, it's a shame, because you don't need an agent. If you can submit your short stories to like these horror anthology publishers, and sometimes they'll take it on the strength of your story, and then it could end up on the shelf in Barnes and Noble and stuff." And he's like, "It always happens. Stuff like that always happens." I'm like, "Oh, well, I do write horror." So it's it's kind of one of those things where I completely 180. I'm like, "No, yeah, I can write horror. I do horror, yeah." And then
is this horror? Slowly I turn.
Yeah.
Step by step. And that's the Three Stooges, everybody. So let's be honest, well familiar.
But yeah, so I submitted to one of those. First I gave it to my sister to read. My sister's my beta reader, which basically, for those unfamiliar with the term, she reads it, in my stories, tells me if they're garbage, tells me what I need to work on, tells me if they're good. It's one of those things. Usually, fortunately, knock on wood, they're good stories. But so I sent her the horror one, the first one I was ever going to submit, and she said, "Oh, the writing's great, but you don't kill anybody." And I'm like, "Well, I don't want to kill anybody." And she's like, "Well, it's horror, so maybe think about that." So I'm like, so then from there on, I was like, the stories got they started getting accepted, but from publishers, but they got so dark that I'm like, ugh. I'm like, finally someone read it and they're like, that's you. And I'm like, it's not me. That's my character that I wrote. But I'm like, it's
all fun and games until somebody dies.
Exactly. And so, but basically, because of my involvement in getting published in those anthologies and joining the horror community, which horror community is great. Like they all lift each other up. It's one of those things. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are trying to outdo the next guy, but there are also, I find a lot of people trying to help the next guy, which you don't see that in a lot of just show business in general, or if this counts as show business, what have you. But
Entertainment.
yeah, entertainment.
Yeah.
And so through that, I met my current publisher, Water Tower Hill Publishing. So I never would have had that conversation not taken place, and had I not gotten involved in that horror community, I never would have met the people who published Angel of Death.
So which of your books was first professionally published?
First professionally published was Attack of the 3D Zombies.
Attack. Okay. And
that was written. That's also D&T Publishing. I met them through the horror community. And so I said, I get a middle grade horror book, kind of like a Goosebumps.
So define middle grade.
Middle grade is, so that's anywhere from, I think, like maybe 4th grade. I think they go up to 7th grade.
Okay. Yeah.
Readers.
So it's the two, middle readers. Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, I said, do you ever? I had published a number of short stories with them, and I said, have you ever thought of do you ever accept middle grade horror? Because I've written like a Goosebumps style middle grade horror. And she said, the owner had said, that funny you mentioned that, because we would like to go in that direction. Also in that direction, not completely in that direction. So they published it, and that was my first taste of like any kind of success with the writing, because a lot of kids had bought it and enjoyed it, like they did Goosebumps and whatnot. So that was I enjoyed writing that.
And that got you the first private jet.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And is that when you were writing the anthologies? Was that when you would consider yourself, I don't know what the word is, legit, right? A legitimate published author. Yeah.
So it was, and it was funny. I really didn't even think about that or say that. I didn't say that. I obviously thought it, but I didn't say that until one of the security guards at work, he goes, "Oh man, you're an author now. You're a published author." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, but it's just."
I guess I am.
He goes, "Don't downplay it." He said, "You didn't self-publish it. Someone published it for you. Someone thought enough of it to publish." I'm like, "You're right. They did." So it's kind of like it reinvigorated me. It kind of was one of those things where I'm like, "Hey, all right, yeah, you're right."
Absolutely. I believe in that. I mean, and we teach that in our sales training, is self-affirming, right?
Yeah.
I belong here. I'm not a I can't think of the word. I'm not a imposter. I belong here. I've got value. I've got expertise, etc. So you have an editor. They provide an editor. You work with the same editor over and over often?
For the Angela books. Yeah.
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 So if another series, you might have another editor. Excuse me.
No, most likely it'll be the same editor. She's the primary editor over there at Water Tower Hill. So it's Heather Daughtry. That's the main publisher's wife.
So what's that process like? How many versions do you end up writing? How many? I don't know the terminology yet. So is it rewrite? Is it corrections?
Draft. Yeah. So basically, like, so I send over the original, like what what I've written, and then she'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and she'll say, "Oh, well, this should be changed, but this doesn't make sense here because you did it on this something. You did something else on another page earlier." And I'm like, I didn't even notice that, and that's why he's such a good editor. Like, as much as I've read the Angel of Death one, I wrote it 10 years ago, way before I even met them. Wow. So it's one of those things where I've read that thing cover to cover, I don't know how many times, like, and then she looked at it with her fresh editor eyes, and she said, "Oh, yep." And so she's like, "Oh, this is these are some changes that should be made." And when I made the change, I didn't even have they give you a voice, but I didn't want to disagree with. She was right about all of it, like all the changes she wanted to make. It made the book that much better. And I'm like, I don't know how I missed that, but I'm glad that you caught it. So it's like one of those things where she's really good at what she does, and she's a good author.
So after the editing is complete, what happens next?
So then we had the meetings for the cover art, which that alone blew my mind.
I'm going to show that again.
Yeah. And we'd go through, it was cool. Like they'd go, but like while they were constructing it, like in the meeting, and they're like, "All right, what do we think about this? What do we think about this?" And of course, I'm sitting there, I'm like, "This is awesome. Everything's awesome." And they're like, "John, can you disagree with some stuff?" So we're not going to get anything done if you're just saying this is awesome every 2 seconds.
Gee, guys.
Again, it's one of those things where you're so excited that everything's finally happening.
Yeah.
Like all this thing that you've been dreaming about forever, like for 25 years now. I've been, once it's finally happening and you're in the moment, you're like, this is awesome. This really is awesome. It's like.
When you wrote the first book, did you know it was going to be a 3-book series?
No, in fact, so I wrote the first book. So the first book I wrote, like I said, I had written it 10 years ago. And I had shopped it around to a bunch of agents, and all of them said, nobody wants angels. Nobody wants angels. And I'm like, no, people want them. And they're like, no, we're agents. We know. People don't want angels yet. So I'm like, all right. I'm like, fair enough. And so then I'm like, oh, maybe it's just too short. And then I blocked out that nobody wants angels business. And I'm like, maybe it's just too short because fantasy novels are longer. And so I shopped that around a longer version. And they're like, nope, nobody wants angels. And I'm like, oh, great. I just invested more time in nobody wanting angels. And then finally Joshua Lloyd Fox, he's the publisher at Watatoa Hill, and he's an author, a very accomplished author himself. And so he had written this series called the Archangel Missions, and I saw it come through literally while I was scrolling on Facebook, and I'm like, he likes angels, and he's a publisher. And then I know he's successful because I've seen his books, and then I'm like, so I messaged him about it, and he goes, yeah, brilliant, send it along. And I'm like, whoa, all right, yes. It was one of those moments. Yeah. And so, he accepted it and he wanted it, and he said, can I break it up into 2 books? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It was 2 books originally. It was, the original book ended on X amount of pages or whatever. And so he said, great. And so when he went to promote it on Facebook the first time, he said, book 1 in a trilogy. And I'm like, ooh, trilogy. And I'm like, that's awesome. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I should probably write that 3rd book. It was one of those things where when I wrote it 10 years ago, I wasn't thinking trilogy or series. I just wanted to write a book. Like basically it was for my students.
Oh, that's cool. Talk about that. I wanted to get to that. Sorry.
Yeah. Let's talk about it now. So,
let's talk about it now.
Yeah. So it's not often I get a lot of readers in there. Like they don't read on they'll always say to me, oh, I don't really read on the out. So, when they're not locked up or whatever. And so I'm like, oh, that stinks. But then I had like one group of kids one time that they were devouring anything they could read because it killed time. Yeah. Like, if they were, especially in there, it killed time. So they were reading just about everything that was in there. And there was like, they like these books called the Blueford High series, which is all about like their kind of environment or kind of where they grew up and whatnot, like inner city. And then they liked their fantasy books. And so I'm like, all right, well, you guys love these things. I said, you guys love the fantasy, huh? And they said, yeah. I said, but we don't, one kid was like, I don't really relate to any of the protagonists. Like they're not from where we're from. They're not, all these X amount of things. So I was like, and I didn't write fantasy at the time. It wasn't even on my radar. So I'm like, well, I hope you guys find what you're looking for. And then, but nothing ever materialized. And then all of a sudden, maybe like a month later, it wasn't that night, but a month later, I had a dream, which ended up being chapter 2 of The Angel of Death, the first one, where I'm in a nursing home room with an elderly man who I'd never seen before. I'm just sitting there with him though. And then a girl comes in that looks like Angela, and she kisses him right on the forehead, and he flatlines, and she looks at me and then walks out, and I'm like, what was that? And then I woke up, like I do everything. I woke up and I wrote it down. And so that literally turned into all of this. And so I wrote that book. I want everyone to enjoy it, but they are literally my target audience, my students. I wrote it for them. Wow. So.
All right. Couple of quick questions on business, and then we'll get into the books themselves. Let's see. How much time do you devote daily or weekly to writing?
I devote at least 1 hour a night after my wife and kids go to sleep. Okay.
And what's the next series or book you're working on?
Right now, I am working on I'm writing a book called 10 Toes Down, which is it's a slang way of saying all in or fully supportive. And it's about I'm writing stories about teaching in DYS, like some memories I've had of times when these kids have shined. Like it's like I was saying earlier, it's the part of them that society doesn't get to see. Well, I kind of want to bring it to society in the form of the book.
Do you have plans at some point to make writing full time?
No, because I love what I do during the day. I mean, I love that I get to do that during the day, and I love that I'm living my other dream right now, also of writing books and having them published. So I got the best of both worlds right now, and I never want to leave, because honestly, my students and my job, that's one of my biggest muse and inspirations anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me to leave that, it's just, I'd feel like not just like a phony, but I'd feel like, this is what I love. I love my job. Why would I leave it? And then, so, but it'd be great if the books got huge to the point where I could, but I still wouldn't. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
I always joke with my boss. I'm like, I don't remember applying for the job, but you're stuck with me. No.
All right. Tell us about the first book, Angela of Death.
So Angela is kind of a loner, but she wants to, like, in the neighborhood where she grows up, you kind of have to be part of something for protection. Like, you can't just walk around, or, it's not a very safe area to walk around in. So she's going to join a local gang that one of her friends is like one of the higher ups in the gang. And so her friend doesn't want her to join. So they do the initiation of jumping her in, but they also say that, oh, you got to kill someone. And so they're setting her up to like kill someone, but really it's like the gun's loaded with blanks. They just want to see if she would do it. They don't want her to do it. They don't want her in the gang, or her friend doesn't anyway. So she chickens out at the last second. She like, well, I'm glad you couldn't do it. And then, but you do have to leave because we're talking gang business or whatever, and so she's leaving, and a rival.
Does that make her protected?
Well, they are going to protect her on some level, but so when she's leaving, a rival gang is there to like shoot up the house, and she gets killed in the gunfire. Like, and so she wakes up looking down at her corpse, and meanwhile, Michael the Archangel is there, and he says, basically, you know what, you're going to be an angel of death now. And we're gonna, she's like, well, I can't even take a life. Did you see what just happened? He's like, well, you're not taking it for them anymore. You're taking it for the big guy, basically. And so she's like, all right, well, how am I going to do this? And so this launches her into this whole, there's going to be a next big war battle for heaven. So she's on the good guy's side. And, it starts out, there's a lot of, I pull a lot from the Bible and put it in there, like where they had the great battle for heaven where Satan was cast out and he took a third of the angels. Those are the bad guys, basically. Like, the story's almost writing itself. Those are the bad guys. And I just need to build the good guy army. And then, so it turned from that, one story into like, oh, well, this could be epic and I'll write them for as long as they want me to. Like, as long as they'll let me write them, I'll write them.
So a trilogy could become a multi-book series.
Yeah, because I'm trying to. Yeah. So I'm pulling some of the other characters, some of the minor characters, and giving them their own trilogy right now. Like, one of the characters, I'm giving him his own trilogy right now that I'm working on as well.
Oh,
like,
that's cool.
I got a couple. I got the book about my students, and I got that book going on, because I do that because it stops me a lot of times from having writer's block. Yeah, maybe it takes a little longer to write some of the books, but it also, I'm constantly, if I can't come up with something for a few days on the other thing, at least I can work on the other thing. That way that writer mind is still going, and that discipline is still going. Discipline is huge with it.
Yeah. All right. 2 last questions.
Yep.
Simple ones. How do people, if they want to reach out to you, what's the best way? Would it be your email, which was in the crawl? It's john@cady@gmail.com.
Yep, that's one way. And then the other way is just on Facebook, I'm John Cady Author. On X, I guess we call it now, I'm John Cady Author. Instagram, John Cady. Everything's John Cady Author. Basically, it's not hard to find. Okay, good. And the books are available certainly on Amazon, and where else? Yeah, so Amazon and the publisher's website, which is watertowerhill.com. And then just pretty much where we always say wherever books are sold, but online, like so Target online, Walmart online, and then Barnes & Noble online. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I know it was a challenge to get you here on time. You made it because of your work schedule, and thank you. And I'm sure the audience does as well. Well, thank you very much. You got it. It was a wonderful experience. Awesome. And thanks everybody else for watching and listening. This is a show about business and business challenges. This was a fun one because we got to bring in a story about the book. If you have concerns about the sales effectiveness of your company, whether you're large or small, whether it's just you or you have a team,
feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or LinkedIn, and that's at Winning Business Radio, or you can drop me a note at one of my email addresses, kevin@winningbusinessradio.com. Our company is Winning Inc., part of Sandler Training. We develop sales teams into high achievers and sales leaders into true coaches and mentors. Hey, we're not right for everybody, but maybe we should have a conversation. Thank you, as always, to producer and engineer Juan for another job well done. Thank you, Juan. Be sure to join us next week. That's Monday, April 28th. My guest will be Timothy Swords, executive coach and certified mindfulness teacher. I'm looking forward to that. Until then, this is Kevin Hallinan.
You've been listening to Winning Business Radio with your host, Kevin Hallinan. If you missed any part of this episode, the podcast is available on Talk4 Podcasting and iHeartRadio. For more information and questions, go to winningbusinessradio.com or check us out on social media. Tune in again next week and every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time to listen live to Winning Business Radio on W4CY Radio, W4CY.com. Until then, let's succeed where others have failed and win in business with Kevin Hallinan and Winning Business Radio.